Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm starting this video from the comfort of my creeper, and today we're going to be doing something that was requested, oil change. And I'm going to be doing it like I'm teaching somebody for the first time, and hopefully you can pick up some tips from it. Changing the oil is one of the most important things you can do on your vehicle, that you can do yourself, but it's also one of the ones that can, if it goes wrong, you can destroy the engine. So I try to be very careful on that. Unfortunately, I have first-hand knowledge on that. Wish I didn't, but it was many, many years ago. And I'll just tell you that engines don't run very long without oil. So I'll show you how I learned, how I was taught by many different people, and hopefully I can get you through this. It's going to be with, you can't really see it too well. This is a 2004 Xterra V6, but everything that I'm going to be doing is applicable to any engine, but specifically we're going to be doing one on this. So anyway, I'll gather some tools and see if I can point the camera the right way while I'm underneath the vehicle. We're doing this definitely old school on the ground, and no fancy lifts here. Anyway, follow along, and hopefully we can all learn something. Okay, one of the first things you're going to do is get underneath the car and familiarize yourself with it. When you change the oil, it's best to have the engine warmed up, because that circulates all the gunk and the goodies that you want to drain out. And first, what I'll show is the oil filter itself. And it's really hard to tell by this picture, but it is a tiny little thing. It's probably fist size. You'll see when I change it. And then, so you want to locate the oil filter, and then you also want to locate the oil drain sump, and that's it right there. And on this vehicle, it happens to be a 14 millimeter, which is exactly the same as the 9/16. It's one of the few times they cross over. So while you're under here, you want to kind of take a look, and I did happen to notice that there's some oil. See the wetness? You don't want wet. And I got to looking, got that there. All right. Well, when you're looking for an oil leak, you want to consider that the car or vehicle is going down the road, and things blow back. So in this case, where I think this is coming from, if I can focus on it, not very easily. Let me see if I can turn on the flashlight. No, not really. Okay. See if we can get it to focus on here. And it's not focusing very well, but that's not supposed to move. And if you look closer, you can see that part of it is moving and part of it isn't. That's where a crack is. So we're going to look into that further. It's nothing we can fix today, so make a note of it. And I do know that it's not losing a whole lot of oil. I checked it the other day. It was down like half a quart. However, this engine only takes 4 quarts, so it doesn't have a whole lot to spare. Anyway, let's get going with the oil change itself. Okay, before I crawl underneath, I'm going to do just a little bit of prep. And one of the things that I always make sure to do, and I'll use this for illustration. You can see how tiny it is. See the gasket there? Okay, if you don't lubricate it with some new oil, just doesn't take much. Just get it on there, smear it around. What that does is it keeps it from sticking to the engine. I'm just going to go through a lot of hot and cold cycles, and that gasket has been known to stick. And I actually had one time. It stayed on the engine, and I put the new filter on, so it had 2 gaskets on it. Started up, blew the oil gasket, because it's only designed to have a single thickness, and sprayed down the engine compartment. Unfortunately, that wasn't the time I lost an engine. Anyway, I'm going to quit bringing that up. It's painful. Just do what I do, and you won't get in trouble. But anyway, you want to pre-lube that. Now, some people will pre-fill the oil. If you're that anal, go ahead. But sometimes, if the filter goes on like this, it's going to spill out anyway. Having said that, millions of these have been put on dry, perfectly fine. Just make sure you get the right amount of oil in the engine. And also something I do too, which I've written very poorly, because all I had was a tire crayon. I couldn't find my silver Sharpie. But you want to write the approximate mileage and the date that you put it on. You can make a notebook if you want. However you want to do it is fine. Just make a notation so you don't go over what the allotted time and mileage is for doing an oil change. Okay, now having said all that, time to crawl underneath. Okay, so it's time to let the oil drain out. And like I said before, it's warm, so it should come out pretty easy. And remember, when you're underneath, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And it's very easy to get turned around when you're laying on your back. So if it seems like it's tightening, it might be. So anyway, we're going to do that. Going to loosen it. And then what I do is I'll take it completely out. And you'll feel it, but keep pushing towards the pan. All right, this is completely loose, and the reason I do that is then I let it come out, and I don't fumble and drop it into the pan, which I've done many times. Okay, we're going to let that drain out, and I want to show you something with the oil plug gasket. Now is the time to inspect the gasket, because it's a good place for an oil leak. And this one, like most, has a nylon gasket, and it's designed to seal the oil drain plug, which this one's in good shape. Sometimes they'll have a crack in them, and hopefully this, when you find this and have to run back to the parts store, it's not your only vehicle. Because what you end up having to do is put it back in, fill it up with oil, go on up there, come back, drain it again, and change that gasket out. But this is actually something that's very important to make sure it doesn't have any leaks or is broken. Okay, next thing we're going to do is change out the old oil filter. Okay, now we're underneath, and here is the oil filter that we're going to be taking off. And I showed you before how small it is. I don't have an oil filter wrench that will work, so I'm going to use my universal one. otherwise known as really big channel locks. I've used this for many things over the years. It's not a bad idea to have a set. These happen to be Craftsman, but many people make them. So anyway, what you want to do is grab on best you can, and it's really tight under here. So I'm hoping I can do it. All right. Once again, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And this is actually pretty loose. I'm hoping that's where some of the oil is leaking from. So let's get the oil pan under that, because it is leaking out already. And try your best not to let it get everywhere. But there it goes. So we'll let that drain for a second. Take it off the rest of the way. All right. And this pan happens to have a little spot where you can put it on there. And let it drain out the rest of the way. Okay, seeing how loose that oil filter was, I'm kind of hoping that's the source of the oil leak, and that cover that I saw was just like an engine cover and didn't contain any kind of a gasket. I'll report later what I find. Okay, so remember we pre-lubed the gasket, and I also made sure that the old gasket is off of the engine. And then we screw it on. Okay, well, this is a pretty important part. It was loose, but you really don't need these ultra tight. I don't even use an oil filter wrench to put them back on. What I do is I seat the filter, about like that, lightly seat it, and then I go a quarter to a half a turn past that by hand. And that's perfectly fine. Now you'll check it for leaks, of course, when we start it up, but now it's time to put the oil pan bolt back in before we start putting oil in. Also, from experience, it flushes through really quickly if you forget to do that. I don't know if you could see me doing this, but I'm just putting it back in. Now this is one that's also got lube on it just from the old oil, so you're okay. But you don't want that dry either. And then there is usually a torque spec. Normally it's about 35 foot-pounds. Long experience, that's about 35 foot-pounds. But any excuse to buy a tool, you can always use a torque wrench. And there is a torque spec for it. Trust me, every manufacturer has it. All right, so clean off the old oil that dripped, and time to put oil in. Okay, believe it or not, something as easy as pouring oil in, there is a little trick to it. You'll notice how the bottle is shaped. So you got the sloping part there. When you pour it in, you actually have that part pointing down. That also works for antifreeze, brake fluid, anything else you're pouring in. And what that does is it slows the fluid down enough that air gets in. You don't have a glugging problem. So, and then when you get close enough, because this stuff's so expensive and I've got time, I just leave it there and let every little bit drip out. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to go to my oil recycling area. And I'm going to be pouring the oil into one of those jugs so that we can take it to the recycling center. If you don't have a recycling center, I know O'Reilly's is one of the places that will take old oil. Check. I'm not sure what other ones are. I just happen to know O'Reilly's is one of those. So unfortunately, I'm going to need both hands for this so I don't spill it on the ground and cause another Exxon Valdez disaster. Old reference for some of you people. Anyway, so I'm going to shut the camera off and pour that in so I don't cause a mess. Okay, now's the time to double check everything. Make sure the oil cap is on and tight. Make sure the oil filter is on. Looks like my crayon marks got wiped off, but I happened to take a picture of it beforehand because I wanted to get the part number 2. But now's the time to check and make sure that that's tight, which I did off camera. And also, which you saw me do, make sure the drain plug is tight. You don't want those falling out. All right, so now comes the reward for all your hard work. Can we get started up? Now, when you start it up, it's very normal. Sorry, it's so dirty. It's my daily driver. Very normal to have the oil light stay on for a few seconds while it builds up pressure. If it stays on any longer than that, though, yeah, do something about it. And ignore the service engine light. We're going to take care of that too. I think it's the gas cap because I've had it shut off after I've fueled up sometimes. And then sometimes it just comes on. But anyway, right now we're worried about the oil and everything looks good on that. No weird noises. And we're going to crawl underneath and double check for any leaks in case you can't hear me with the engine running. Alright, I'm just going to enjoy laying on my creeper for a little bit. As you can see, there was no oil under there that wasn't there before. And after doing a little investigation, I think that oil filter was loose because it was barely hand tight, and you need a wrench normally to get it off. So that wasn't good. As far as the broken plate or whatever it is, I'll investigate that further. I'm hoping that it's just like an engine cover that would explain some of the rattles I hear, and hoping there's no gasket to retain oil and that it's leaking, because it really doesn't leak all that much. Anyway, that's how you do an oil change. I hope I was able to help you with a few things. Just be careful, and you'll save yourself a lot of money.